Hi, I'm Pernigo. This is another map analysis video. And this is a meme. But this is also Bregov by Slimek and KlixX. It's a map. I forget what country it's set in. While I was playing this on stream like 2 weeks ago or something, a buddy of mine said it was Discount Russia or something, and he's from Russia, so he probably knows what's up. There you go. That's my review. So we are once again in T-spawn as usual. This map has no callouts. Interesting note that I learned in the comment section of my what was it? I've already forget it. Gongji. That map's video that I did. Apparently, map makers can't put their own words in the top left. So when you see those callouts, it's only what Valve has used in their maps. Those words are available for other people to use, but you can't set your own strings. The idea that that would be a limitation is so insane. I get the idea that maybe it's meant for translations or something, but shouldn't there be some way to put your own translations in there? I don't know, man. Just seems like a common sense thing. So that's pretty silly. Oh, I get bonked on the potted plant. Now the real question is, while we're sitting here spinning, hold on. I think he's still stuck. I just want to see if I can stand on this. Hold on. Oops. Oh, I can. Cool. So you could probably do like a 3-man boost or something onto that. That would be epic. Unfortunately, you don't have a vantage point, so you can't really use that for anything. But it is epic that it's possible at all. So, yeah, Bregov. So let's go to B from here. This is the road to middle. This map has an actually staggering amount of drops, where once you drop, you can't get back up, or it... Also, this is just sick, man. What's wrong with you? Jesus Christ. Also, a lot of pop-ins, like what you see right there. It's like you run the map once and test that and figure out, oh yeah, I probably shouldn't do that. I mean, the biggest issue is I believe that is in gameplay. I think that's a gameplay space. Or maybe not. No, it isn't. Okay, never mind. Well, it's still very distracting when you come in. And the other issue is that while you can actually... I guess it is technically in gameplay, right? Because you... Oh, you can't stand up there. Well, whatever. Maybe it's not as big of an issue for gameplay's sake as I thought. But especially when you can't really ever get used to that. Snapping in like that, fading in like that. It just is very jarring. So you want to fix that where possible. Even if I was trying to respond to some imaginary straw man argument about how it's actually fine because it's not in a gameplay area and nobody's ever going to be over there and you don't have to worry about that. It's clearly a bug, so fix it, you know what I mean? So that's like our first little letter. And actually some of the interiors or the roadways into the bomb sites remind me a little bit of Jingshen. Jingshen's A rotation. That's kind of what this reminds me of, where you're kind of winding a lot before you actually get to the point where you are looking at the bomb sites. It's a lot of walking to get here, and a lot of curved angles, and not a whole lot of entry points. So it's not like you can break out of this area and go into mid, or there's like another entry point from here into the B-bomb site, or even all the way back over here. Like, I mean, I guess this is a fine amount of space to be going for a rotation, but I think there probably should have been some effort placed into working some part of this connector into the rest of the map, because right now it feels very isolated, and that feels also similar to the whole idea of like having a drop where you can't get back up, which I'll show off later on. There's I think there's 2 or 3 spots in that, which I said staggering amount, but it was staggering when I first played it. I'll put it to you that way. It's just one of those things that I feel like the map would improve with some more interconnectivity. It would be something that would benefit the map in general. Give a little bit more decision making to the players, and particularly make the approach to the B-bomb site a little bit less one note. Admittedly, the entry point is still the same onto the site. If you say you open this area up and you somehow connect it to this area in middle, so you walk in here, and instead of walking directly towards middle or taking a right, you can also just go straight. and you know, wrap around and come out over here or something. Say you do that. That's good enough, I think, of a basic idea for a layout change, and it still results in the CTs holding the same sort of angle, and perhaps they have a different sound cue depending on where you're rotating from, but it also means that they have to second guess themselves a little bit more if they push out, the CTs that is, and the Ts have to watch for CT aggression in a couple of different ways. And once we get into middle, I'll explain why that potential gameplay change could benefit the middle area as well, because I do feel like middle needs a lot of work right now in terms of just a functional layout setting. So those are my thoughts for now. Anyway, this is the entrance into the B-bomb site from the CT, or rather the T rotation. CT timings and T timings seem pretty okay across the entire map. I would say that if you were gunning for just raw fights, both teams would be heading towards the A-bomb site, because of the proximity, and CTs get to both bomb sites quicker. But there's so many more angles on the B bomb site to check. It's like a much more, reactionary bomb site where you're basically going to be making a lot of snap reactions and clearing a lot of corners if you're trying to get onto this site. That being said, I think you're supposed to only be able to plant when you are actually on the, like, inside the water. But as you can see here, I can plant without being there. So maybe that's intentional, and if that's the case, that's fine. I actually think that it makes the bomb site better anyway, because you can plant with, like, say, a smoke wall that lands like a smoke here and a smoke here that you could find lineups for, because I do believe the skyboxes are fairly open. Let's see. Yeah, so you could definitely find some lineup that would, I mean, that's obviously way overshot, so you could find some lineup that would work there, I'm pretty sure. And if you land, like, smoke here, smoke there, and plant, and then fall back, you can actually hold the bomb site, obviously, just from here in a situation, or, like, play the backside with this pillar, or something like that, right? So that's a situation where I think it's not impossible to find value to planting on the upper side. You know, you can obviously do it over here as well. So not having to go into the water is a good idea. Obviously, you can plant anywhere in the water. It's not a bomb site like on... I'm forgetting all of these map names. Mustang had that part where you could plant on the crate. That was an interesting one, I thought. But just the fact that you can plant on the upper side, you know, you could plant over here and then hold from this... I think the call-out for this is asshole. Yeah, you can hold it from asshole. This is just such a dick spot to be in. Just because it's like... It's like if Mirage Ninja A-bomb site had the ninja section, and it was just like a whole room that you had to clear. It's basically the same thing. I mean, at least you expect people to be there, but it is it's pretty nuts that it exists at all. Now, while for some reason I'm not able to make the jump over there, I guarantee you it's just my fault. You can obviously make the jump over here, and then I'm pretty sure you can... Oh, maybe you can't. Yeah, I guess you can't. But it would be fine, I think, to be able to stand on that. But obviously, just this angle alone is fairly powerful as a contact play. I sort of liken this to bench on Mirage A site while we're on the topic of Mirage. Obviously, it's not as easy to get onto as bench. But by being here and looking into A main, and the distance is also shorter, so you have more of a risk. You know, when you fall back, you have to then... you know, try and get to safety, which shouldn't be too difficult with all the cover over here. Also, the culling of the grass seems very aggressive. Yeah, I don't know if the optimization was too aggro on this map, or if that was actually necessary to get the map to perform. If that's the case, I really have to wonder what's causing all the performance issues, because, I mean, you're using, like, a lot of two-dimensional stuff here, and a lot of, like, really, really jank assets in general, in terms of the quality of what we're seeing. So I can't imagine any of this stuff should be very performance heavy. Maybe it's like the outside regions, like the water. But even the water seems fairly still, you know, and low poly at that. So yeah, I'm not really sure what would be performance, what the performance concerns would actually be, but... I guess this was probably walled off at some point to prevent another sort of set of asshole/dickish positions to be taken. But I think it's kind of neat, the idea that you could be over here. I guess what you could probably do is you could probably... Oh, there's like a little pixel angle over here. So somebody had some fun with that one then. So yeah, that's actually 100% intentional by the looks of it. Well, that's fine. I mean, pixel angles are very, very difficult, and they're kind of one of those things that's controversial in Counter-Strike. I must admit, I'm not immediately opposed to them. You know, it's one of those things where it's sort of like wall bangs. You know what I mean? You just have to instinctively know after playing enough, like, this is the wall bang angle, this is the spot that I can be in, this is the spot I have to avoid, and this is the spot that I like when I'm studying my opponents at tier 1 competition. I know that they're going to be in this position. Similar to that pixel gap, actually in, again, Mirage A site, there's in Firebox, there's like that pixel gap that you can see through, or at least you could have a while ago. I don't know if they changed that or not. But I guess the bigger issue is I don't know if this position is, like, while you can see through it on this side, right? And I'm pretty sure if I put a man there, I would be able to, in theory, see him. Yeah, I can see him right there. So you're going to be able to see movement is the bottom line, movement that goes through there. That is, as long as I can see the other way. Maybe it should be more visible in that sense instead of less, because the less visible, the harder it is to get an angle and the more margin of error there is, and et cetera, et cetera. But I think that if you make it a bit more visible, it's actually more fair. So I don't really know what to make of that exactly, but it is one of those things where I do feel like I can see why it's controversial. I can see why a lot of people don't like them. Making it more of an actual spot on the map instead of a gimmick cheese play would probably be better, just to abide by everybody's sensibilities, I guess. But I honestly I can't say that I have a huge problem with the idea of stuff like that, because to me it's just another element of the map design. So, with that said, if I step on this man's head, yeah, he would need to stand up, and then I'd need to take a fight. So I can also take this fight and then fall back. So there's a lot of places for oppers to either self-boost or get boosted on top of. And of course, if you're good at movement, you can do that pretty consistently. Okay, yeah. I mean, the B-bomb site has a lot of cover. It has a lot of angles to deal with. And that's before you even throw in the this call out down here, the pit area. And I imagine, I mean, because pit is just big enough that you can't Molotov the whole thing with one Molotov. Well, maybe you could. I guess if your Molotov landed like right here, it might work. No, I guess it doesn't spread over here. Oh, a little bit. So yeah, you would need. There's probably going to be some Molotov thing that you can do over here somewhere. Like, I guess you could aim right here. And that would spread. Actually, that would be okay, right? You can't step over here, right? Like, say you've tried to fall back, now you can't. I mean, I guess you could come do this. But something like that, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised anyway if somebody found a decent, you know, Molotov where they just do something like this. Oh, you're gonna want to work on that clipping. Something like that. That's a little too much, but you can figure out some Molotov that will get people, and that's the bottom line. So I don't really think that position will be too big of a deal. It just forces a Molotov, similar to, well, again, Mirage A as the, what is it called? Dark Under Palace, that sort of area, where you have to throw a Molotov, pretty much. It's just that area is also very, like, this pit area over here is much more withdrawn from the rest of the map. So the idea that you would, I don't think that this area, because there's only one way in or out, I don't think it's one of those areas that requires or mandates even, or allows a lot of flexibility. I think it's a very committed position, and it's very difficult to escape. It's much more difficult to escape than Pit or Graveyard in Inferno A site. Honestly, I don't know that many positions that. I guess Dust 2 A site, that pit, right? The long pit. That area is kind of similar, where if you're there and you're being attacked or pushed, that's a situation where you definitely need to aim your way out of that one. You're not going to be able to just use mobility, really. Also, a lot more aggressive culling. You don't really want to. You got to fix the culling on this map, man. Holy moly! But I would definitely say that that's one of those positions where it makes sense. to draw a comparison. Anyway, some more aggressive culling, pretty intense culling. Anyway, we'll wrap around the map and then go into middle. So this is the path to CT. Porta potty that is sadly not something I can interact with. It's not the ones on Vertigo. Can't hide in them. That I would like to have that happen in a pro game, by the way. I'm sure it already has, I guess. But the approach to CT, I believe this is indeed CT spawn right here. What I like about the CT approach in general is, to be anyway, is the fact that it has this bit of cover to break things up. I feel like not enough maps end up having stuff like this, where even if it's an area that, in theory, you're not going to see action on most times of the map, right? It's not a middle, it's not a bomb site, it's just a rotation. The fact that, you know, you still have enough time or enough room to like play around and have firefights be made somewhat interesting, I think is neat. I think maybe you could even have like a little bit of cover over here or in some other area. Maybe it wouldn't necessarily be particularly high or particularly safe either, but it's like something you could jiggle around, like thinking train, A-site, E-box, stuff like that. Might be a similar shape or similar size that, you know, only one person can really fit behind. I guess in a way it's similar to this porta potty in theory, a little bit smaller perhaps. The idea that you have access to something like that, because without this porta potty here, if you were to imagine it, it would just be a very long, dangerous approach if you were trying to rotate over. As it stands, it's a pretty dangerous approach because it's so long and because you have so little cover, but at least you have the porta potty. It is very bangable, by the way. So there's at least that. And once you get to the site, you have a lot of cover. But between the site and the porta potty, very open season, right? And between the porta potty and CT, also open season. So in that sense, I think maybe a bit of cover that's like over here in this area or something might help break that apart a little bit and give you another angle to jiggle off of. But at the same time, you do have this, which you can do. You can sort of do that, right? You got to be cognizant of this wall over here, but you can sort of do this. I think that's fine. So no real complaints over here. It's just, it is another long straight rotation, right? Another long and, you know, just walking for a while and more aggressive culling. But I think that's okay. It's not really like, it's not as long and it's not as separate from everything else in the map as the approach from the T side, in my opinion. So I think you can get away with that if there was no other example of such behavior, right? This is the rotation into middle. In my opinion, and I'll show middle off a little bit more later, I don't think that you should have to jump to get to middle. I understand the idea behind making it take a little bit more time, but just the how high this box actually is makes it not 100% of the time you're going to make that jump. And I think it's something that hinders the rotation a lot. And the other thing is that if you do want to silently, you can't. You can't silently rotate from top mid to CT. Maybe that's fine for balancing, and you could keep that some other way, having some obvious sound cue regardless of a jump. I don't know how exactly you would do that, but maybe the drop can still be audible, but the jump as it is, like it needs to be worked around so that you don't have to deal with quite so much finickiness, I guess. It's not a 100% play in that sense. So, and honestly, I think that if you were rotating out of here and you were able to take more time but silently drop, that would probably be okay, right? The idea that you have something like, you know, if you drop from both, you can silently drop, but if you want to make it faster, you obviously just walk out and that will drop you and make a sound. I think that would also be fine. Then you're making a trade-off. But obviously that's more for the developers to answer back to. So this is the A-bomb site. I much prefer the A-bomb site to the B-bomb site. Not only is it a bit more open, not only is it a bit more tactical as a result of the fact that you can throw more grenades in more places, I also think that firefights at every stage of the bomb site are more interesting. You end up having a situation over here where on the rotation, pretty much immediately getting over here, you have, sort of reminds me of Inferno B-bomb site actually, in the CT side of things, probably just because of the ruins, I guess. I don't know, like these ruined or busted ass rocks or something like that. But it reminds me of that just because of like all the different angles that you can take as a CT. Obviously, you don't have two distinct paths to get here in theory, but the rotation down to middle can be that second path. It's just it's not as connected as the ruins of the church in Inferno and the CT angle that usually gets smoked off. Those two paths are much closer together. This is much separate, but I do like that, you know, you've got a couple of different angles to take here. Now, this little hole over there is where you have the CT approach, or the T approach, rather, and that area has a lot of interesting gunfight potential as well. And then on the bomb site itself, well, it's mostly due to the fact that the post plants can be so dynamic. It's one of the more dynamic bomb sites I've seen as a result, because you can plant on the low ground over here, including on this pillar, which I don't know if it's intentional. And as long as you're on this raised up pillar, it's actually very trivial to make the jump. Like, you'll notice I can't make the jump without that. So I actually have to do that. And then it's fairly trivial, because I think it's probably because of the fact that you get on the highest point of that area, and then this is like a lowered slope or something. And like right when you're hitting it. So it's super easy, and it feels really, really responsive to jump from that lower site to the upper part of the site. But you can also plant in here. You can't plant on top of here, notably, but you can plant up here. And so that's a situation where you can clearly see that there's a huge variety and a huge potential for a lot of different gunfights to open up as a result of planting either lower or higher. And I found a smoke on the T side approach that would land about over here, and it would allow me to, you know, plant on the side and then pull back, you know, if necessary. And that would obviously be really ideal for holding it from the T approach. So that's one example, and obviously that open of a plant allows you to peek from the middle area as well in here as the terrace if you have mid control. And so there's a ton of different situations, but you also have to account for that when taking the bomb site, because it's so open over here. And this is one of those areas where maybe a little bit of cover over in this area might do some good, like an upturned trash can lying over here or something that you could crouch behind. Although I guess it's so small that it would have to be standing straight up over here. And then you could like boost on top of that to elevate your Z, or maybe there could be like a bench over here that you could elevate your Z with. Just something, even if it's not something you can take cover behind, but you can use it to elevate yourself, like an upturned trash can, actually. Wouldn't be that bad of an idea, in my opinion. And then, of course, you can also jump on this little ledge over here, which is nice. Allows you to play the odds. There can be a lot of exciting rifle fights, I think, if you're in a situation like this, where you've planted the bomb, like, over here or down there, and the CTs are coming in from, like, there's like one or two CTs that are coming in, and one of them goes this way and the other one goes that way. You can imagine the clutches in your head, baby. That's all I'm saying. So yeah, there's tons of opportunities, tons of potential in that sense for this particular bomb site. I think they really did a good job with the design of it overall. The only thing I would say is on the approach from middle probably needs a little bit more work, and you've got some culling of a tree over there, so please fix that. But yeah, I think the bomb site being as dynamic as it is allows for a lot of interesting firefights in the post plants, and then obviously the angles that you have to account for as a terrorist at taking the site are not as high, like in number, as the one on the B bomb site. So the fact that there's less angles to worry about from the defender's point of view makes it a little bit more, like, equalizes the playing field a little bit, so that players don't have to be sick aimers just to make the map work for them. Whereas on the B-bomb site, you pretty much need, like, at least either an excessive amount of utility that is unlikely to be a catch-all solution because you don't always have all that utility in every round, or you need a ton of aim, like just the crazy amount of reaction time in order to make it work. And that's where I find I take issue with the B-bomb site's construction when compared to this one. Not necessarily saying that the B-bomb site should be as open or as tactically beneficial, or the idea that it's open in terms of the skybox or whatever, because there's no giant roof over this site compared to that one. I'm not even saying that. I think you can work with the concept that you have over there in the B-bomb site, but it definitely doesn't lend to the same quality of firefights as the A-bomb site generally tends to have. That's my critique so far. I do think that it has a different kind of gameplay, and that's fine in theory. It's just probably could be modified a little bit. Now, I think when I played this originally, this actually was sealed off, so this is new, but this is oh, wait, no, maybe, no, this was always there. I'm thinking of something else, I think. But this is another drop, so actually there are 3 different drops, but this is into the middle of the map that I'll show off later. So there's a couple of different ways that you can hit the middle from T-spawn, this obviously leads to A, and you can go from A to middle. Counter-terrorists can also do that for a really late rotation into middle if they find that nobody's pushed A at all, which is why it's valuable to send an A lurker over here, because even if you just have 1 or 2 people cheating towards this side, they can throw utility, they can observe aggressive culling of a chimney or whatever the hell that is. They can also make sure that no counter-terrorists are trying to rush over here and fuck up your mid-play. And just, I mean, there's tons of things that you can do in this area. Obviously, the fact that this is low means that you can just bide your time and wait to see if they boost over. And if they don't, you can just obviously get back up and walk over here and jump over yourself. For the sake of showing it off, first of all, this is the approach to A from the terrorist side. And I think this is the smoke that I found. You stand right up here against this window. You aim at the where the 2 rocks are. Well, this whole series of rocks meets about there. And I'm pretty sure it's just a jump throw, and it will land in the spot that I was talking about earlier, where you can then plant relatively safely. I'm pretty sure anyway. I don't think you're visible if you do it over there. So, and then from mid. Oh yeah, no entry sign. Yeah, the placement of this is really baffling to me, because I actually feel like, even though I get the idea that this is a wrap over, the fact that this is a no entry, like, it seems like it would be a more reasonable approach to mid. And I guess the idea is that it takes a little bit longer for Ts to get there, so the CTs don't get immediately overwhelmed. But I think maybe instead of having this be a road at all, it would feel better for the player if this was sealed off in a more immediate manner, so that they didn't get the idea that maybe they could, in theory, go there. Similar to, I talk about like the chest-high walls that prevent us from getting out of the map. It's a similar complaint in that sense. So closed gates feel pretty dumb, especially when you can see through both sides, or you can see that both sides have opportunities. But I guess there is a little bit of gameplay associated with this outside chance of a wall bang. In that case, I would probably say make it so that there's some way to elevate your position on one side of this area and take away the wood, and then suddenly it becomes more of a like, that's an angle you actually have to worry about. It's like dust 2 doors, but you don't walk through them. There's some element of strategy and some value that you can get out of holding it in that situation, or just the position. So either you can do that from T-spawn, or you can do that from over here. Maybe you could even work that into my suggestion for linking these 2 positions together, where you're linking this B side of the map over here. Well, maybe the B side of the map links into an elevated position that lets you see into T-spawn. And so that's another sort of benefit that you can get as the CTs by seeing rotations through there, or I guess STs if the CTs are rotating through there for some reason. Happens sometimes. But anyway, let's talk about what we actually have here and not my imaginary machinations. So walking into middle, it becomes immediately clear that there's a lot of, I would say, negative space over here, and I don't mean that as in like positive or negative in terms of an attribute, just negative spaces, and there's nothing really here. It's technically playable. Like, you can walk around in here. Maybe you could do a 3-man boost or something silly, but there's nothing on this wall. There's no cover. There's no way to self-boost your way up to this area. There's no way to really use it. There's no way to make this actually a worthwhile investment for the player to even pay attention to. And so, in that sense, you basically have to ask yourself, what is this space doing that is justifying its existence on the map? A wall justifies its existence by stopping you from being able to move in one area or another, but an open area that leads to nowhere and gives you no benefit. I mean, maybe you could like get some lineups done over here or something. You can like line some shit up from at certain angles from the vines or something like that. But I can't imagine that beyond that, there would be much actual value. So you could fix this relatively easily by making a couple of spots over here that you could jump up on top of, like some crates or some barrels or whatever, a bench, whatever the case may be, that allows you to peek over. Or maybe you do a jump on one, like one person jumps on an object and then the other person jumps on them, and it's a boost over. And it lets you see over into this area to see if any CTs are pushing. And it's from a different angle than they may expect. That making it a bit more niche so that it requires 2 people in here would probably be more balanced, so that you know as a CT, even if you get picked by that, you know, oh, there's 2 people mid. Or, you know, better if you see it before dying, you don't see it. Rather, you don't die. You just get information that somebody's boosted up there. You know, oh, I got 2 people mid. You can make that information play. I don't think this is a ladder, no. Because I think there was some weird vine ladder that Valve put into canals a long time ago, which is why I always have to test that every single time I see that. Also, can you just not jump up on here from the ground? Oh, you can. I was just bad. But you could probably B-hop onto this, which is pretty neat. I like that. Oh, maybe I'm not bad. Maybe you really need a very particular timing on your crouch. I don't know. Maybe it only works over here. Yeah. So maybe lower the collision on that so that you can jump at it from all points. But you can almost certainly B-hop onto that. I'm pretty sure you can anyway. So assuming you could do that, that's pretty cool that skilled movement players can do that. And then from there, obviously this is one of those drops. So the 3 drops of this map that you need a boost to get back over are in the same area. There's this drop, which goes from the A rotation, T-sided A rotation to mid. There's the mid drop into lower mid itself. You can't get back up here unless you can jump up onto this, but I don't think so. No, even for this, you need a boost. I really disagree with this one, whereas the other one is a bit more understandable as it's a more niche thing, and you actually want a sound cue, and you want to make it so that it's a committal action, like something that the player is committing to by jumping down there. Similar to, if you remember the map Ruby, which was added to CSGO for a while, had something similar to it, and in a CT rotation into the A-bomb site, I believe. And I thought that worked out pretty well. Maybe I'll do a video on that map at some point. But in this situation, it's mid, dude. It's not like the idea that you're segmenting it so heavily really means that, well, let's talk about what it actually does. Like, what does it mean for the map? And then we can discuss of whether or not that's a positive or negative, impact, in my opinion. It means that if you drop down here, your options are much more limited than what they were before. And like before you drop down, you can choose to drop down, and then you can go either A or B, depending on what the rest of your team wants to do. And it will unlock a series of avenues for you. Like the B rotation involves going through this wine shop that eventually will allow you to do another winding path similar to the B approach into the B bomb site. And this is the hallway that we were talking about earlier and planting around earlier. So in theory, mid control obviously rewards you with another pathway into B. Pretty important stuff. But it obviously also involves that if something goes wrong, you can't really rotate out. The way that you would rotate out is to go past the CT spawn area, which is the 3rd and final drop. Which, if you remember, I was talking about dropping down from here silently instead of making noise. Well, if you drop down here, you can't get back up. So that's the fact that there's so many of them in this tight area. I really feel like 2 of them shouldn't be in here. I feel like the CT one should not be in here, and the T1 definitely should not be in here, because the T1 makes it so that you can only commit to a bomb site after you've fallen. Really limits your options. I don't think that that's a smart thing to do. Whereas at least when you're a CT dropping down, you actually have more map control overall and more knowledge of where the terrorists are not than the terrorists have knowledge of where you are or are not. Because you know at the start of the round when you drop down here, you've probably got 2 people B and 2 people A, and you're the sole mid guy. At that point, you can make a decision to try and jiggle peek top mid to see what you can find out, to see if there are any rotations happening, to see if they are, obviously you won't be able to see from that angle anyway if they're boosting into over here, but at that point, it still leads to the same entry point, so it's not that big of a deal. But you can rotate to a position of power for your team relatively safely, especially if it happens to be A. If it happens to be A, you're rotating to help the A guys, then you are doing a pretty good job. Like you have a lot of opportunity to help your team in a very positive way. B is a longer rotation and exposes you to anybody who's lurking mid, which is something you're going to have to be knowledgeable of. And that's obviously important. But at the very least, the CTs have a little bit more of like information that they can get, and they can react accordingly in more interesting ways. Whereas the terrorists really only have 2 options, commit to B or commit to A. If they happen to be more than one of them in mid, dropped into lower mid, then maybe they could also boost up into here and take CT on a wrap and try to hit B, or take A on a wrap and at that point from CT side. And that's also sort of interesting, but I think that that's also fine if that's a situation that you find yourself in where you keep the CT and A side drops and you remove this one and make it more of a set of stairs or something. I'm even fine with this being a decided sound cue as well. I don't mind if this is something that you 100% end up making sound for. But the fact that you can't get back up is bad. I think it's just down to the fact that there needs to be more more options that a single terrorist can do or has in general in the round than committing to a site once they drop down here. It allows for much more engaging and much more, well, I won't say engaging because I can't really back that up without relying on anecdotes. But I believe that at this point, when you drop down here, you as a player, you lose a lot of agency. And that, I would say, is not great for skill expression, for tactical understanding, and for responding to mid-round calls, and for being able to be flexible enough. Like, maps basically ride they're stuck between a rock and a hard place of trying to be purposeful enough to provide something unique and have their own voice, if you will, or have their own purpose or essence, something that allows them or gives them something different and allows them to bestow upon their players something different than an experience that they would get later on. But that experience is created by players who need their own motivations or need agency to enact their own personalities and their own wills on the map. And so this is sounding very arcane, I'm sure, to a lot of people. But the crux of it is that you need to be able to have enough freedom as a player to display what your skill level is and how you manifest your personality through your gameplay. As in, are you aggressive? Are you passive? Are you a scared player? Are you, etc. And when you lose out on options, and it's based on map design, then there should be a trade-off. There should never be such a low amount of options where the only options you can make are aggressive or the only options you can make are passive. You should be able to, unless you walked yourself into a corner, literally, assuming you're just going through mid, like in this case, right? We're not walking into a corner after taking a gunfight and making it so that we can get Molotoved out really easily. We're not doing something like that where our mistakes were made, and that was the anatomy of what we ended up doing. In this case, what we're doing is we're walking into mid and falling down. And that situation where we're making the decision to drop down carries a lot more weight than if we were to just walk further down mid. In Mirage, if you wanted to go mid, you could still rotate to either bomb site, and the number of interconnectivity, the amount of interconnectivity and the number of passageways between the various places. If you wanted to go underpass, if you wanted to self-boost into window now, which for some reason they allowed in a much easier way than you could before, in a much more safe way than you could before as well. If you wanted to self-boost into window, you can do it twice now or two different ways instead of just once. And that's great. Sure, whatever. Okay, Valve. But you can also go through A connector, and you can go through B connector, short, right? You can go all the way around back to T-spawn and then go through apps or go through palace or go through A ramp. So there's a bunch of different ways that you can go from middle. Part of what makes Mirage so fun to play in that situation, or mid in Mirage so high quality from a gameplay standpoint, is precisely because of the fact that you have so many different options, right? And I'm not suggesting that you always need to have a lot of options, but if your only options as a more passive player or a player that is taking things a little bit slower and trying to be more tactically minded, once you drop down here, your only options are to just shift walk instead of full W. You know what I mean? It's to slowly clear angles or it's to wait it out, which is not the same thing as being able to take a different pathway to your destination, and then the pathways offering more to the players depending on what they actually end up leading towards, right? So, if I want to take the underpass path, then that is a longer pathway, but it opens up different opportunities for me to throw utility. I can throw fakes to A from upper, from top of T apps. I can do all sorts of different things from that situation that I can't do in any other position. So there's different parts of the map that unlocks. There's different choices that unlocks. And that's one of those situations where I feel like, in this case, we're being locked out of a lot of positions, and we're not really given a whole lot of player agency in general when we have to make a drop like that. Whereas like, at least the CTs can then make decisions that involve them going to the bomb sites or holding middle. But the terrorists don't have the luxury of being able to just sit in middle for a long time, because obviously the time is working against them until they plant the bomb. That's one of those situations where I feel like if you make the CT stuff more, or if you make the drops and things that force players down certain decision-making pathways, if those are more about more slanted towards the counter-terrorist side of things, they tend to go over better, even though they are not necessarily my favorite thing in the world. At the very least, you have a lot of situations where, as counter-terrorists, you are funneled down a certain pathway in terms of your decision-making, but you can still make an impactful decision on the round. Whereas the best decision for you as a terrorist may be to go back up mid and then rotate around, and you can't do that because you fell. You know what I mean? Like, you can't do that because you dropped down. So that's one of those situations where it really doesn't make any sense to me why this is here, really. I don't really see what it adds. You know, again, you have to either force rotate to A or force rotate to B, because of the time limit, and you just have to hope that you can make that work, right? Whereas I feel like there would be more of a benefit to opening it up. I feel like, you know, if you could open it up a little bit more so that you could come back up here to the top of mid and you could, you know, link up with the rest of your team, then that would be good. And another aspect of this is that there should probably be more connectivity from mid to the other places, like to the B bomb site rotation. And, you know, maybe there should be a slightly easier way to self-boost. Like, obviously, you can B-hop over here, but maybe you should be able to self-boost over here instead. Maybe there should be some other thing that you could do. I don't really know about the whole mid to A thing. I think maybe it's fine. But I do think that, in general, you'll find that the most successful maps, and by that I don't mean, like, financially successful or whatever. I don't even know how you would track that. But I don't mean the maps that have the most player numbers either. I just mean like the maps that have produced the highest quality Counter-Strike global offensive competitive games. They tend to have the like a lot of interconnectivity within them. They tend to allow players to make a lot of decisions at all stages of the map, at all stages of the round. And players live and die by those decisions in game, but they also show their personality and show their skill and enact their agency and will into the world, or into the game world, through those options. So that's one of those situations where I would definitely recommend some more attention paid to the interconnectivity of the default CSGO maps that come with the game that we've all played on for a while, like the current active duty ladder pool, but also just some other maps like Sub-Zero, some maps like Iris, maps like Ruby, like I mentioned earlier, that tend to have more that tend to have more opportunities for players in general, and also your favorite CSGO maps that are not made by yourself, if you go back and think to those. So, like, just consider what made them good, and in that situation, I do feel like this map needs a lot more interconnectivity, even though the bomb sites themselves seem okay, especially the A-bomb site to me seems like really good. I would say the gunplay across the map tends to be okay as well, but the decision-making that I have, that's where things start to fall apart. As a player, I don't always have the decision-making that I'm used to having from playing other maps, like Feast and Basalt from this particular contest, or other maps that are even, you know, more distinct than that, perhaps. Maps that are even older than that. So consider the droppings, whether or not you want to drop silently, whether or not you want to allow a drop at all, whether or not you want to allow people to come back up. But most importantly, considering your culling, and check your back faces and all that other stuff. And I guess that's it, man. So aside from the technical issues related to the map's graphics, hopefully the interconnectivity of the map, the value that you can get from various parts of the map, hopefully that stuff is something that can have another look taken at it. And obviously, if there's any feedback or responses that one has to my particular points, make them known in the comments, and we can have ourselves a nice little chat. And that's about it. So thanks. Bye.